Yo, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kyle. You can call me Bap. Thanks so much for tuning in. And let's not waste any time. Let's get straight to it. Here's the sample.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly living a dream that will never.
Here's the flip. All right, let's break it down. Okay, so let's break this joint down bit by bit, and let's start with the sample. So this sample comes from a song called Love for Love by a group named The Whispers. And this is actually the title track off of their 1983 album, Love for Love. So the part that I took comes from the first verse, and it's actually two different parts of the verse, but we'll listen to just one part so we can set the table for the rest of what we're gonna talk about. So let's take a listen.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly living a dream that will never.
All right, so when you compare this versus the finished result we heard in the intro, you can hear we have quite a lot of work to do. So to get there, I basically did three main things to the sample. And the first is take out the drums. Whenever I'm reimagining a sample and I begin to add my own elements in, whether it's drums or bass or anything like that, I want to get rid of anything that could potentially get in the way. That way I'm able to do freely what's in my head and kind of get those ideas out without fighting against what's already there. There are a host of applications that do this sort of thing really, really well. Me personally, I like to use the music rebalance tool from Isotope's RX software. And here's the sample with the drums in there.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly living a dream that will never.
Now, after using the Isotope rebalance tool, here is the sample with the drums removed.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly living a dream that will never.
Crazy, right? So you can hear it's not a complete removal, but it's closer to what I need, and I can definitely work with this. Okay, so after removing the drums from the sample, the next thing that I needed to do was pitch and stretch the sample. So I pitched it up 7 semitones and stretched it just a little bit to make sure that it fit within the tempo that I wanted to work with, which in this case was 87 BPM if you're counting quarter notes. So let's take a listen to how it sounds.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly living a dream that will never.
All right, so the last step in my sample production was to spread the sample across different pads of my sampler. Now again, there are a ton of great samplers out there, both hardware and software. For me, I use the Maschine software and the Maschine Micro by Native Instruments for most of my sampling, but for you, please use whatever you feel works best for your workflow. Now with the sample spread across the pads, I take a little bit of a detour. Instead of continuing on with the sample production, this is actually where I start to program the drums. Now I have a few different approaches for how I do this, and I'll lay them out in a different video, but let's just say for now, after finding some drums and cutting them up, it sounds like this. Now, one of the reasons that I like to work on drums before I lay down the sample is because I like to play my samples to my drums, sort of like they're an instrument. So here's what I played.
When you touch me, I know that I'm truly. When you touch me, I know that I'm know you. When you touch me, I know that I'm truly. When you touch me, I when you touch me, I know that I'm truly. When you touch me, I know that I know you. When you touch me, I know that I'm truly. When you touch me, I dream that will never.
And there it is. That's the foundation. Pretty solid, but I do hear some other ideas that I'd like to work out. So this is where I bring in the band and I add whatever other little textures I hear. Now I'll play the individual instruments I added so you can hear them on their own, and then we'll bring them all back in together with the sample and the drums so you can kind of hear what they sound like before going into Pro Tools for mixing. Here's the bass. Here's the Rhodes. Here's the synth. Here's the piano. Here's what they sound like together. Alright, so for mixing, there will be more in-depth mixing videos to come on this channel. So for now, let's just hit the highlights. So once the session is set up, all the tracks are in and routed correctly, I use VU meters to gain stage and make sure I'm striking the right balance of volume and loudness. After gain staging, I move faders around and turn knobs and get a nice static mix with levels and panning. Outside of the VU meter, up to this point, I really don't touch any plugins. So from here, I work top down from the buses to the individual tracks, just kind of identifying problems and fixing them. This is usually where EQ and compression start to make an appearance for me. When it comes to EQ, I like to start with the top and bottom frequency ranges first because those are typically easier to dial in for me. Then I spend the majority of my time in the mid-range. So once it's all feeling good and sitting nicely, I start to mess with some harmonics and distortions and tape saturations and other things like that. This is mostly just to give the track some extra color. And this is also the point where I work out any sends, effects, reverbs, delays, that sort of stuff. Now, as I add more things to the song, whether it's instruments or signal processing, the song tends to get louder. So to make sure it's not getting too far away from me, I check the VU meter on my mix bus along the way, just to make sure I'm not pushing into it too hard as I go. One of the main goals is to leave lots of headroom for my mastering engineer to work with. Okay, that's it. So with all these components in the bag, let's take one last listen to the final bounce just to hear how everything comes together. And we're going to let this one ride us all the way out. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Kyle. You can call me Bat. Shout out to the Whispers for the Love for Love sample. Give them a listen when you get a chance. Their whole catalog is really, really dope. If you dig this kind of content, if you like this, feel free to shoot me a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe because I do this sort of thing all the time, so I can definitely keep the content coming. If you have questions or comments at all, feel free to hit me in the comment section here, or you can also look me up on IG at BatFlips. You can look me up there. Don't be shy. Talk to me. I'll talk back. And I believe that's it. Yeah, we'll meet back here and do this again sometime. So until then, be well, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Peace.